Welcome to the Child Care Director's Chair, the podcast for bold educators who are ready to lead, grow, and shake things up in early childhood education. Whether you are a teacher eyeing that lead role, a lead stepping into leadership, or a center owner dreaming big, this is your space to grow with purpose and leave your mark. Hosted by heart-centered leadership coach Erica Sacoccio, each episode brings you real talk, actionable tools, and a contagious laugh or two, all designed to help you step into your next level with confidence. So pour your coffee, pop in those earbuds, and take your seat, because your leadership journey starts right now in the Child Care Director's Chair.
Hey guys, it's Erica with the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. And in early education, we're not just teaching numbers and letters. We are shaping nervous systems. And today on the podcast, we are talking with my friend, Mahri Wrightington from Monster PD, where we're unpacking emotional development and why it isn't extra, but fundamental. Emotional regulation isn't just a child skill, it's a classroom skill, it's a leadership skill, and frankly, it's a survival skill in early education. So we're going to talk today with my great friend who's been training educators all over. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for having me. This is fun. Sure, absolutely. So I own a company called PD Monster. PD stands for professional development, which is obviously just the term we use for training in the field of education. So I've had I'm going to just say a 20 plus year career because, we have to keep some things a mystery. So 20 plus year career as a school psychologist, a school administrator, and an education consultant. But I'd like to share with you that I don't know if I've told you this before, Erica. My very first job in college was preschool teacher.
No.
And that is what, I forget because I'm usually training in like K-12 districts, and I always start by saying, I started my career as a school psychologist, but that's actually not true. I started as a preschool teacher, but I was a college student, so I think I didn't think of it as career, but I loved that job. I still remember the little ones that I just fell in love with, and I learned so much from the teachers that were there. I was a student teacher, of course, in college, and that is really kind of what kicked off my educational career. I was getting a psychology degree, and so I just wanted to share that with you and your audience. And so now I own this company called PD Monster, and I work with educators of all kinds. So not just K-12 classroom teachers. I work with centers. I have worked with college professors and everything in between. And so much of what you just talked about is what's in my wheelhouse. Obviously, all of my degrees are in the, mental health arena, educational mental health. So my doctorate is in educational psychology. So I've just spent my career trying to teach the other stuff, right? Not just I do some instructional trainings and can teach differentiation and, how to do stations and all that good stuff. But mostly what I get called for is mental health, behavior, trauma, stress, and not just for the kids. I do a lot of staff training on ourselves, right? How do we make sure that we're in the right kind of headspace to do all that stuff? So that was probably more than you asked for in that intro question, but that's a little bit about me.
So on behalf of the ECE professionals everywhere, welcome back. Welcome back
Thank
to
you.
the land that you loved and needed.
Yeah.
So when educators hear the phrase tiny humans, big feelings, what do you see happening in classrooms right now?
Yeah. So I think, I don't think there's an educator in America who would not agree that there is a behavior epidemic going on right now. Behavior is one of the toughest things, and we could talk for hours and hours about why, but we're not going to do that. Because, there's lots of reasons. People probably have their own hypotheses. It's not one thing, right? It's kids are not changing. Society is changing. Technology has changed us. The fast pace of life has changed us. Less outdoor time has changed us. And I'm saying us because it's not just the kids, right? Just everything has changed. And it's tough for us adults to keep up with how fast things are changing. Our biology does not change for millions of years, but our society changes way, way more quickly than that. So biologically, we haven't really changed to keep up with the stress level of modern society. And our biology is, we're not going to see that change in our lifetime. And for hundreds of generations to come, our biology is going to stay the same. But kid behavior is tough. So that's what I see going on in classrooms, is that educators are overwhelmed, underwater, stressed out. And it's not for lack of love of children, right? We both know, because we work with people, we employ people, we supervise people, we coach people. And I don't know too many who aren't stressed. Everybody's stressed, and student behavior is one of those things that stresses us out. So when I am doing my session on Tiny Humans, Big Feelings, what I want to do is a few things. I want to teach people what's going on when students have a meltdown or, big behavior, what's going on inside their brains and bodies, because when we understand that, we can address it better. We can address it more, I'll say, scientifically, because there is a whole field. It's called human behavior science, and educators don't always get trained in behavior science. And so understanding kind of what's happening for students allows you to approach it in a different way. It allows you to approach it in a way that is less stressful for you. And here's the thing about adults, or about humans, is our logical brain and our emotional brain are not friends. We are either logical or we're emotional. And often in schools and in centers with our little ones, they're causing our stress to rise, and then we're handling things emotionally. And that doesn't work too well. We got to handle it logically. And so that's what I want to do in my session at your wonderful conference that I'm so excited about. I want to help people kind of understand what's going on in those little tiny human bodies so that we can look at it differently. And then I'm going to give lots of practical strategies about how to do things a little, like, it's not that you have to throw out everything you knew or everything you thought was right. It's just small shifts. We're just going to make small changes so that it's a little bit easier to manage the behavior. And we're going to do some self-reflection too on our own stress. So I've got lots to share. I'm really excited about it.
I love it. So why do you think emotional support is often like invisible labor in early education, but it requires so much skill?
That's such a good question. Honestly, I think it's invisible because we don't talk about it enough, and we're not trained in it enough. Every time I work with an educator, whether they have a doctorate in science and they're teaching high school science, or whether they have, an associate's degree and are teaching early childhood, whatever training we have, we're not trained enough in this. We're just not. None of us. And I've spent my career kind of learning all of the things that I wasn't taught in school. And I'm one of the people who was in school like forever and ever and ever, like you, right? Just I have a bunch of degrees, and even though I have those, and I felt like, okay, I have to get all these things so I can have the career that I want, and I do, and I'm very happy, and I'm happy with the choices that I made. But looking back, I thought, hey, I wonder why I didn't learn this. Oh, I wonder why I didn't learn that. And that happens to me on the daily. I mean, and this is how I kind of create trainings, is that I come across an issue, someone that I'm working with, a school that I'm working with, or a staff that I'm coaching is like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I'm like, that should exist for us, right? We should have had a class in that. So my whole job is that I have given myself is to kind of take like graduate level training content and smush it down into just tangible, concrete takeaways that whoever I'm coaching, whether it's, a paraprofessional in public school, an early childhood educator, a high school science teacher, and say, okay, this is what you should have learned in school that none of us did. Here you go. And try to give it in a way that is just really digestible and I think easy, right? Or that's what I try to do anyway. Easy shifts to make to say, oh, okay, that's not rocket science. I could just say that instead of say this, and that is what's going to work.
Yeah. So your work now at PD Monster, what do you notice administrators often overlook when it comes to emotional regulation, both for the children and the staff?
Yeah. I think what's overlooked is that, and there's research on this, that one and done training or one and done PD, one and done talking about it never works. You are never going to get things off the ground if you bring something up one time with your staff and say, hey, stress management, hey, self-care, hey, student emotion regulation, and you talk about it once during the school year. Nothing will get off the ground. And so even though I own a company called PD Monster, when we think of PD, we often think of like a speaker coming in, a one-time training. And it's just not enough. People need follow-up conversations. And I always say to directors or principals or whoever's hiring me, I said, it doesn't have to be me every time, but I want to be part of a larger initiative. Because if you only are going to talk about emotion regulation for students one time, well, what happens next week when you get a new staff member? And what happens 3 months later? There's something called behavioral drift, where we always have good intentions. Is the same reason why we are New Year's resolutions, right? That we set a New Year's resolution in January, and then by February, a very large percentage of us have been like, I'm not really doing that anymore. It's called behavioral drift. That's just something we learn in human behavior science, that we humans love to live in our comfort zone. We just do. For every part of our lives, we love our comfort zone. And so it is not your fault when you go to a training and then kind of forget to implement everything over time. It's your brain and your body saying, let's not do new stuff. Let's live comfortably. Let's do it how we always did it. Let's just be like that. And so you might go to a training and think, this is wonderful. This is amazing. But a few weeks later, a couple months later, it drifts away from you unless, and you asked me about leaders. So I guess who I'm speaking to is your leaders right now. You have to keep it alive. You have to bring it back up. And it doesn't mean, like if you're working with Mahri from PD Monster, it doesn't mean you have to bring me back every month. You can, but you want to bring it back up. You want to say, hey, staff, how's that going? Did anyone try this? Did anyone try that? And you want to keep it alive. You don't want to just one and done, let it rest. You want to keep bringing it back up, keep talking about it. Ask for people to demonstrate and model for each other if they found a way that works really well. Share a celebration. Ask for help. Ask for support. And I know so many directors who are wonderful at this, but making kind of a shame-free environment that it's okay for the staff to say, I am not working well with this student. I don't get it. I don't know what to do. He doesn't respond well to me. Help me. Right. And so I think that's something that directors, leaders could do, is keep those conversations open and make it easy and comfortable and risk-free to say, I'm not doing well with this kid. He's triggering me. I'm triggering him. Can we talk it through?
Yeah, that's great advice. How connected, this is something I often think, but how connected are children's big feelings to the emotional capacity of the adults supporting them?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's everything. It really is everything. I think there's so much conversation we could have about that. Students are picking up everything from us. They're learning from us how to regulate, not just in what we tell them. They're watching. Right? So if they see us roll our eyes, they're learning that that's a social behavior that they should do. If they see us or hear us, say some sarcastic things, they're learning that that is a socially appropriate thing to do. And so a trick I always teach educators is to flip the script, to imagine, even though it might be silly to imagine a 3-year-old saying to you what you just said, because they wouldn't have maybe the vocab, but you still do it in your mind, right? You flip and you say to yourself, if the child did this or said this to me, would it be okay? Would it be good? Right? Would it be something I could say, great, good job. Thanks for saying that, or thanks for trying that, or, would you be happy with it? And that often helps us catch the things that we might be doing. We might be teaching students in our nonverbals, in our, language that help us say, oh, that might not be the right thing. So yeah, students are just learning from us they're watching, they're soaking us in. Right. And that is how they learn emotion regulation skills. Emotion regulation does not naturally develop. It develops through instruction, modeling, and practice. And so that all comes from us. Right?
What would you say is one well-intentioned mistake that leaders might make when trying to support educators who are emotionally exhausted? Because let's face it, we all tired.
Yeah, we are all tired. I think you and I have talked about this before. I think something that we do when we want to help our staff de-stress is we talk about self-care. But I think the mistake is that there's I think a misinterpretation of what self-care really is, because self-care has a lot of different components. One component of self-care is relaxation, right? So when you go home from work, we all have our relaxation activities, right? Mine's scary movies. I love a scary movie. I just do. Horror movies is just like, I mean, I know there's so many people who just like go to sleep watching murder, and I don't know why that relaxes me, but it does. But Erica, that to me is not a very deep self-care strategy. I think a healthy relaxation is healthy, right? We need work-life balance because you'd be miserable if you didn't have work-life balance. And two entrepreneurs talking to each other, we need to work on this, you and I, all the time, right? Because we work all the time. Self-care, I think when leaders say to their staff, oh, you got to take care of yourself. Yep, this is a stressful job, go home and relax. That's not quite enough, because relaxing at night, while it's important and a lovely part of life, it doesn't last you until the next day when you have a screaming toddler in your face and an angry mom wanting to talk to you and, a dismissal snafu and a whatever, all of that stress. Having, watched a movie the night before, taken a bath the night before, or, had your favorite treat the night before, it doesn't last you. And so I think if our leaders understood that self-care for educators needs to be deep, needs to be beyond surface level relaxation, that would be helpful, because they could have more focused, more in-depth, more supportive conversations, because self-care for educators really looks more like self-awareness, emotion regulation strategies that work in the moment. And do you see how different that is from like taking a bubble bath the night before, where you feel good in that moment? And I'm not telling anyone to stop doing those. Those are lovely things to do. I'm not going to stop my bubble baths and my horror movies and, my gossiping on the phone with my girlfriends. Those are all my relaxation activities that I love, right? I'm going to do them, but I know that they're not enough for me. So I think if our leaders could understand better how to support staff by having that conversation about what is self-care, relaxation is good, but it's not enough to sustain you in this really stressful education job that we all have.
Yeah. It makes me think of something too, that like kind of to go back to the children, like how can leaders help their teams move from seeing behavior as something that they need to fix to emotions as something they need to understand?
Yeah. Good question. So I'll give you a little tip that comes from the world of cognitive behavior therapy. I'm a psychologist at heart, so I have that lens all the time. And so when some of your listeners might have learned this like in their own journey. Sometimes therapists teach us this. Sometimes a class would teach us this. And so when we think about student behavior, the chain is actually ends with behavior, but what starts it is a thought, then a feeling, then a behavior. So the way to try to understand the trajectory of how we ended up in a big tantrum is to back up, right? Okay, we have a tantrum, but let's back up. What was the feeling? And then what was the thought? And so I'll give you an example. Let's say we had the kids outdoors, right? And there was maybe we have a little, 3 or 4-year-old, and they are back inside having a huge meltdown about their outdoor time, their recess time. And we want to work backwards. So we want to, first of all, help them understand how they're feeling. So we want to supply that vocab. So we might say, it looks like you are so sad, or it looks like you are very frustrated, right? We want to give them a word. Then we want to back up and try to figure out what they were thinking. What was the thought? Because we don't have feelings without thoughts. We have thoughts that create feelings. So they might have thought, I thought it was my turn, but Jimmy took a turn, and that made me mad. That makes sense? So that is a deep way to understand student behavior. It's not just about the behavior. It's actually really not about the behavior much at all. It's about the feelings and the thoughts, and they go in that order. So I'll say it one more time for your audience. So thoughts precede feelings, precede behaviors. So when you're processing with a student about their behavior, a lot of the times what we want to do is talk to them about the rules, right? You are not allowed to do that. Or, this is the rule in here, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should not do. But that doesn't get us very far in terms of changing behavior. And sure, we have to set rules for kids, absolutely, right? But that part I don't need to teach anyone. Adults already know how to talk about rules. But what I do want to teach people is back it up. Have the student try to figure out what they were thinking, try to figure out what they were feeling. That leads you to a much different conversation. Now, are we doing that with our infants? Not really. But at the infant level, we are modeling language. That's how they're picking it up, right? So even at the infant level, saying, you are so sad right now, right? And just labeling. That is a great thing to do. And then as students get older, we try to help them understand what they were thinking, what they were feeling, and then how they acted. But usually we jump to, you did this, you shouldn't have done that, next time do this. But really what they need processing on is less about the behavior and more about the thoughts and feelings.
Wow. I never had anybody break it down like that, but that makes a lot of sense.
I've got lots to share, Erica.
I know you do. I know you do. I know you do. And I'm here for all of it. So how do you help programs recognize when emotional struggles are a system issue, not necessarily an individual teacher issue? Because sometimes it isn't the teacher. Sometimes it's the way the system is set up.
Yeah, for sure. And I do a lot of training on creating like emotionally safe classrooms, emotionally safe spaces. And you're right. It's not just one thing. It's not just, oh, this person is saying the wrong thing, or, you know, this room doesn't have a cozy corner. It's not one thing. It's a lot of things. So often what I will do is go in and check it out, right? Just kind of sit for a little bit and observe and then talk to the staff. The best information I get is from talking to the leaders and the staff, not necessarily from observing. I like to observe. I like to just see what's going on, but I don't always have the luxury of observing. I'm sometimes doing virtual training, or, you know, sometimes I'm coming in when there's no kids there, so I don't have a chance to observe. But I get more out of what the staff is telling me, like, this is what's stressing us out, or we don't know how to handle this. That's where I can say, hey, let me give you some strategies for that. You know, oh, tell me what you have set up for this, or putting those things in place. So that's really, I think that's really where I get the most bang for my buck, is just listening to and believing educators, right? I think there's a fear sometimes that they want to prove, you know, whether it's to me or to whoever, to the boss, you know, who might not be in the room, like they want to prove it, like, come see it. But I come from a lens of, I'm going to believe whatever you tell me, because that's your reality. Even if someone else sees it in a different way, that's your reality. And so that's really what I like to do is, you know, hear from teachers, from leaders, like, where are your sticking points? What is stressing everyone out? I often frame it as, what's giving you a pit in your stomach? Because the pit in our stomach is fear, because we don't know how to handle something. And we're afraid that X, Y, or Z is going to happen today. And if X, Y, or Z happens today, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so what I help staff do then, and leaders do, is put into place something that I call a response protocol. So we just can have, let's say we have an 8-person team, you know, on the floor in our center, and we can say, when X happens, we all know that we're going to do this protocol. We don't have to check in with each other. How do you want to handle this? Can you take him? Should I take him? What are we going to do? We just know. We say, yep, when this happens. And what that does, it doesn't necessarily make the situation any different. It makes you feel differently about it.
Yeah,
it takes the
control.
Yeah, you feel more confident. Yeah, and you just say, I know how to do this. And to be honest, a lot of behavior response is time and space. We're waiting. Those kids have to go through it sometimes. There's something called the escalation cycle. I don't know if all your listeners will know about that, but the escalation cycle looks like a little bell curve, right? And it's like we're doing, any human, right? But we'll talk about kids here. You know, kids going along just fine. Life is good. A little trigger happens, right? And then they start up the journey here. And what we want to try to do, what I try to teach, is you can stop it early. Sometimes we can't, and we get all the way up to the top. And when you get all the way up to the top, Erica, there's no magic. It's waiting. They have to go through it, right? But all my magic is in that on the journey up, I can help stop it. If we have to learn a little bit about trauma and stress and behavior science. There's lots to learn. But once we have those tools, then we can become expert at kind of like smushing that curve down so they don't get all the way to that major tantrum, which, as you know, throws off the whole room, right?
You know, I feel like, and there's a lot of science behind it, a lot of skills behind it, but I also feel like sometimes your mindset around it is like 90% of it. And this is an example for, I'm going to call us the principals, the directors, or, you know, I can't tell you how many times I'll walk in a room and say the same one thing in the same way that the teacher's been saying it, and the child instantly stops.
Yeah.
Instantly stops. And it's like, there was no magic. It's not that they're listening to you because you're the principal. I'm like, you think the 3-year-old knows I'm the principal or care? There's nothing. It's it's just the confidence of this is what we're going to do next. Not a lot of whole extra words, not
Right.
a whole lot of feeding into it. It's almost like we're agreeing that this is where it ends, and now we're gonna head down the bell curve.
That's right. Yeah, and there's something called you're making me think of there's something called emotional contagion. And so if you're stressed but trying to hide it from the student, you literally can't. And it might not be that they're consciously seeing it, but you are literally sharing your stress hormones through the air, right?
You see it.
Yep. And they feel it. They feel it. Yep. And so, yeah. So emotional contagion is something that I talk to staff about a lot, especially it's really important for early childhood because in K-12 rooms, there's often one person in the room, right? Sometimes two. But in early childhood classrooms, there's not just one person. It's very rare for there to be one, right? I mean, and so we are sharing lots of chemicals and hormones all through the air together all day. And part of that, you coming in, you weren't in this situation, so you don't have those stress hormones. You're coming in and you're like, hey, what's going on? Okay, kiddo, we're going to do this. And you were less emotionally involved. And so your hormones are like cleaner. And so the student is like, they don't consciously, sorry, I keep hitting that. They don't consciously know, like, oh, this lady's calmer. There's no way a 3-year-old is thinking that. But they are feeling it from you, right? They're feeling it. Yeah. And so that's why we want it doesn't always have to be that you have to come in and save the day. The staff can help each other. Sometimes we do need a tag out. When you just cannot calm your emotions, you want to remember emotional contagion is going to make this worse. So if I cannot calm myself, then I'm going to tag out and I'm going to have someone else step in if I can, right? That's not always an option, but sometimes it is. And that's a really healthy thing to do. And do you see that connection going back to self-care, right?
Yeah.
Bubble baths are not enough. We got to get to understanding why kids are triggering me. And they just sometimes do. I can think back through my career and think of certain kiddos who I couldn't quite ever get there with, right? It happened. And I think I'm pretty good at this stuff. But even when we think we're, really good at something, no one's perfect. I have had kids all throughout my career that I just could not make that connection with. They just triggered me. I triggered them. It just wasn't a good match. Did I always try? Of course I did. Right. Yeah. But sometimes I had to just say, is anyone else available right now? Because I just had a hard time with that kid. And it's not okay for us ever to say I won't work with that kid. Right. And I would never do that. And I would never say that. But for me to look around for my colleagues to say can we switch? Would that be all right? Right. That's healthy and that's fine. It just takes open communication. Yeah. with your colleagues.
So as I start to wrap up, I want to ask you, what is the long-term consequences for children or for staff when those big feelings are constantly dismissed or rushed through?
Oh my gosh. There are long-term consequences for students who are not getting emotional support and getting those needs met. But that's not on educators alone, right? It's certainly on us as communities, just, families, educators, everybody. We all need to be working on supporting students. And I think some of the things we've talked about today are the place to start. Especially, I'll go back to the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It is normal. It is okay to feel bad. It is normal to have negative thoughts. What we want to do is help children learn to turn them around. And we can't do that well until we can do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So I want people to think about this for a second. If children learn all these things you just brought to my brain, but if children learn emotional regulation by watching us, when adults around them are overwhelmed, supported, and stretched too thin? I want you to ask yourself, is that happening in your program? And what are you doing to change it if it is, right? So this is my last question. What would change in early childhood education if emotional safety was treated as a non-negotiable infrastructure? What would change?
Oh my gosh, so much would change. So if we really prioritized emotion and behavior regulation, that would allow students to grow more quickly in every area. because emotion and behaviors are what stop them from being able to participate, right? And so, we're doing a lovely activity and there's a student not participating because he is dysregulated. And so we have a staff member over with that student. But what we want is their learning trajectory to be, just skyrocketing, right? That's what we want for all our students, that we are, I guess here's how I'll couch it. Educators are not just supposed to teach the old days, like reading, writing, arithmetic, right? It's just, that is not our world anymore. Educators, we have a responsibility to create citizens of the world. So if you think about what kind of citizens do you want as neighbors? Do you want as your doctor? Do you want as your caretakers when you're elderly? Who do you want? Because that's who we're raising right now. That's who we're teaching right now, are people who are going to be part of our communities and take care of us. Right now, they're little babies, and we don't think about that every day. But the little babies that we have in our daycares, in our centers, in our preschools, they are going to be in our communities. And don't you want emotionally regulated neighbors and doctors and lawyers and teachers? That's who we want. And so we want to teach those skills young, so they're taking them with them all throughout. I think that is a way to really think about it. You are, you're teaching your own future, whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to teach them. Whatever neighborly, beautiful skills you want them to have, that's how we want to think. And everything will change when we prioritize that. And, I don't think it's that. I feel like I'm saying that and it sounds like people aren't prioritizing that. I think there's so much room to grow, but I know there are amazing things going on in schools, in centers, all over the place. We just need more and more and more. And we need every new staff member to get on board with that philosophy so that we are creating a beautiful world that we want to live in with the humans that we want to be with.
Yeah. I think I'd like to leave it like this. Children aren't giving us a hard time. They're maybe having a hard time. And the same is true for educators. So at the Early Education Empowerment Conference, we're challenging leaders to move beyond behavior management and into emotional leadership, because regulation starts at the top. So let's not forget that. You can't expect a regulated child in a dysregulated system, and leadership designs the system. So let that sink in. I hope that this episode has been truly impactful for you. I beg you to take a look at the link below, click it, check out the conference. I promise you, you will be so happy if you attend this event. This is only our second year. The feedback we got last year was amazing. We have double the amount of space. We have 35 speakers just on Saturday. And then Thursday and Friday are leadership days. We have another 2 tracks with another 10 speakers from all over the country. I'm super proud of the work that we're doing. Thank you, Mahri, for sharing all of your wonderful thoughts. I can't wait to get my staff into your room to take some sessions for sure. And I hope that the folks that are listening, I hope you feel the same way. So as always, thank you for tuning in to the Child Care Director's Chair podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Child Care Director's Chair, where we believe leaders aren't born, they're grown. If something sparked for you today, share it, shout it out, or pass it along to the next bold changemaker in childcare. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with Erica Sacoccio for more real talk leadership tools and a whole lot of inspiration. Until next time, lead with heart, grow with fire, and always remember, the chair is yours. Now own it.